What is going on, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls? And welcome back into another edition of the Jim Bratton Podcast. I'm going to try to keep today's episode a little bit more shorter and sweeter than last time, especially for you college football fans out there. You'll be especially interested in today's episode in particular, because I'm going to be breaking down some of the big news that came out of the Southeastern Conference this past week, and also getting into some of the big games and matchups and some of the things I expect to see take place in Week 1, which technically has already started, but I feel like a lot of people really don't consider Week 1 to have officially started until their team has, in fact, kicked off in many cases. I know that's true with a lot of Tennessee Volunteers fans out there. Me, of course, as you can see from the shirt that I have on, me, of course, being one of those Tennessee Volunteers fans. But I'm going to try to keep today's show a little bit more short and sweet, because obviously last time I sort of went on and on for a few reasons. Number one, it was first show back after the very long hiatus that I went through, and just wanted to get the feel of things again and sort of knock the rust off in a lot of ways, I suppose. And number two is because I decided to spend that first show ranting on and on about the Tennessee Titans, of all things. If you remember where we were in episode 1 of, I guess, what we can call season 2 of the pod here. And so, now that I have shaken the rust off, and now that the Tennessee Titans are getting ready to kick off their regular season, not this Sunday, but the following Sunday in Denver against the Denver Broncos. And of course, I will be getting into that in much greater detail in future episodes of the show. Possibly even in the next few days or so. I have no idea. But I very much look forward to finding that out, as I hope you all do as well. There's a lot of NFL news that has taken place, not just with the Titans, but throughout all the rest of the National Football League, and I'm not going to get too much into the weeds on that so that I can get going with today's college football content. But for all of you NFL fans out there, I would recommend this. If you have any Dallas Cowboys fans in your immediate family or friend circle, I would highly advise just sending out a wellness check on them, because I would imagine they are not doing particularly well and have not been doing particularly well over the course of the last 24 hours or so. And perhaps I'll touch on that, on why I say that a little bit more in detail in episode 3 of the Jim Bratton Podcast. But to the business at hand in episode 2, as it were. There's been a lot of news coming out of the SEC this week, in that the SEC has decided to move from a 8-game schedule, which this year is, of course, the last year of that alignment, to a 9-game conference schedule starting in the 2026 football season. And so that's a big change. And it's not really that big of a change, as some schools have, and I noticed this the other day when I was perusing through the conference schedules of the SEC. And quick sidebar on that, for the Jim Bratton podcast this season, a lot of my coverage is going to have more and more to do with the Southeastern Conference for, frankly, obvious reasons. But in the interest of fairness, not just as it relates to the Tennessee Vols, but going through all of the other 13 teams in the conference, going through their schedules as well, I noticed something of a trend. Obviously, it's going to be a trend moving forward, but some of the schools have sort of begun preparing, I should say, for the possibility, and now it's going to be the reality of a 9-game conference schedule and some of the other tidbits and quirks that go along with that. I will get more and more into what I mean by saying that later on in this episode. But obviously, a lot of big changes for the SEC, going from 8 to 9 conference games. They're going to what's been termed, as more of the 3-6 model, they're calling it. And the 3, of course, meaning and for those of you who are familiar with the schedule changes, you may or may not feel the need for me to explain it to you guys, but for everybody else, I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway. The 3 in that 3-6 means, of course, that there are 3 fixed opponents, quote-unquote fixed opponents, which are, of course, the teams that any given SEC team is going to play, regardless of who those other 6 conference teams and games are going to be. So, for example, I'll just use the Tennessee Volunteers as an example. If it were me, their 3 fixed opponents would probably be Bama, Vandy, and insert SEC team here, depending on whichever way you want to go, depending on how you feel the, rivalry hierarchy is in the Tennessee Vols fan base. Some of you may want to play Georgia every year. Some of you may want to play Florida every year. Some of you may want to play South Carolina every year, blah, 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 blah. But that is going to be the way things shake out in the SEC for the foreseeable future. SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey has made that abundantly clear. But another thing that I think is interesting as it relates to this SEC schedule change hoopla is the fact that the SEC is really going to get tougher on non-conference scheduling as well. And that, of course, goes into some of the changes that I noticed from perusing the 2025 schedules. Because, as I mentioned before, there's some teams in the SEC that are already taking notice of this. But so one little tidbit that I noticed from some of the reporting from On3 Sports, which is apparently becoming a big name in the world of the internet sports media hoopla, on X especially, is that one of the rules as it relates to these SEC schedule changes are that each team has to play at least one team from another Power 5, or I guess I should say Power 4 conference school. So that would be, just as an example, any given SEC team would have to play somebody from the ACC, the Big Ten, or the Big 12, or just going to throw out an independent, but not just a independent, the main independent that anybody thinks of, which is, of course, Notre Dame. Because Notre Dame, for some reason, likes to play, and this is just a little quick sidebar on how much I dislike Notre Dame at times. The team that could finish 0-12 one year and somehow find a way to be ranked number 8 in the following year's preseason poll. Obviously, that's a little bit of a joke. Their preseason ranking of number 6, I believe, in the preseason poll was obviously well deserved after having taken place, of course, after Notre Dame took place, of course, in the college football playoff national title game in the previous year. But I just had to get that little quick sidebar out of the way, because anytime I hear the words Notre Dame, there's a part of me that just goes, ugh. Ugh. But anyway, those are going to be the rules going forward, I guess, as it relates to Southeastern Conference scheduling. They're going to have to play at least one team from the ACC, the Big Ten, the Big 12, or Notre Dame. Now, the reason why I say that some of the schools in the SEC have begun preparing for this is because after perusing through each team's schedule for the 2025 season, I noticed some of the quote-unquote bigger games on, let's just say, Alabama's schedule, for example. One of their big games is, I believe, in week 3, they will be taking on Wisconsin in Tuscaloosa, I believe. I believe that game is in Tuscaloosa. And whether that's a home and home or not, I have no idea. I did not, and probably should have, but I did not look forward that far enough on SEC scheduling as far as 2026 goes, other than what the rules are for the schedules. But Alabama is going to be playing Wisconsin this year. I believe that game is in Tuscaloosa. For any of you Bama fans in the comments, feel free to point that out to me one way or another. If it is a home and home series, real quick, another sidebar here. If it is a home and home series, and if the game this year is in fact in Tuscaloosa, actually, I believe, now that I've got the schedule pulled up over here, I believe that game is in Tuscaloosa. So, for any of you Bammers out there that are familiar with the Crimson Tide schedule going forward, if you would feel free as to enlighten me if that is a home and home, please feel free to do so, because I'm all for a Alabama Tuscaloosa, a Alabama Wisconsin game at Lambeau Field in 2026. I'm all for that. That should be very exciting for plenty of college football fans out there. But that's going to be a biggie also this year, week 1, which I'm going to be getting into a little bit more in detail in just a second. Week 1 is the Battle of the Death Valleys, as I call it, between the LSU Tigers and the Clemson Tigers. So that's going to be a biggie. That's pretty much all I'm going to say about it now, because why would I spoil the rest of the episode? But that's probably the second biggie of the year. And the third biggie of the year is actually what is and was actually a home and home series of a game that took place last year between Notre Dame and Texas A&M. That was actually a very good ball game last year. I hope that is going to be the case again this year. I'm pretty sure that one is also coming up in week 3, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm very much going to be looking forward to that one as well, as I'm sure many of you are. And so that is pretty much all of the background that I can give today on SEC schedule changes. There's going to be a lot of them in the next year or so. I know this is something that a lot of SEC fans have been clamoring for a while now. And hopefully this will finally put an end to the casual college football fans mindset out there of, quote, the SEC don't play nobody, Paul. Hopefully that will come to an end, because me, as an SEC fan, and I'm sure many of you as SEC fans out there as well, I'm really getting sick of hearing that kind of talk, because ain't nobody got nothing on the SEC as far as pretty much anything goes. So that is pretty much everything that I have to say on SEC schedule changes. A lot of excitement coming up that me and pretty much everybody else, I would think, is looking forward to as well. Lastly, the last thing I'm going to get into today are some of the big games that we have coming up in week 1. And I guess I'm going to get right into the game that I touched on a minute ago, which is the Battle of the Death Valleys, LSU versus Clemson, the Battle of the Tigers, or Tigers, depending on how you want to pronounce it. There's obviously a lot of very exciting things that are going to be at stake in this game. Obviously, you look at the fact that in the preseason poll, both of these teams were very highly rated teams. LSU coming in at number 9, Clemson coming in ranked at number 4 in the Associated Press preseason poll. And a lot of excitement about each team in particular, obviously starting with Clemson. They are apparently on everybody's radar, mine as well, as far as the college football playoff picture goes going into the 2025 season. Obviously, they sort of I guess, snuck into the college football playoff last year in many ways, but were obviously beaten in the first round by Texas. But good news is for them, they're getting a lot of key talent back. I'm not even going to get into all of these studs that they have on defense, because they have plenty of them. But the one guy in particular that is coming back that I am going to touch on for many reasons, mainly because he is a Heisman Trophy contender in a lot of people's minds. Cade Klubnik should be a Heisman Trophy contender, and probably will be, if he does decide to come out, will probably be one of the highly evaluated names in the upcoming NFL draft. And so I'm going to be very much looking forward to seeing what Cade Klubnik can do in 2025. And of course, we all know the sort of mindset that a Dabo Swinney coach team goes into every year, regardless of where they're ranked in the polls. And this year, of course, is obviously no different as it relates to the Clemson Tigers. The LSU Tigers, on the other hand, find themselves ranked number 9 in the preseason poll, and I guess the week 1 poll as well, because to my knowledge, the AP hasn't come out with another poll this week. But LSU's obviously got plenty of talent coming back this year, despite losing a lot last year. And the one guy that they have coming back that is probably going to be very much in the Cade Klubnik discussion as well, of being a top quarterback that is coming out in the 2026 draft, is Doug Nussmeier. Doug Nussmeier, and I'm going to go ahead and make a prediction and say that for many reasons, there are going to be plenty of scouts at this game to evaluate many different players, the quarterbacks in particular. But one name that I'm going to keep an eye on in the stands as I watch this game is Doug Nussmeier, who is currently the offensive coordinator for the New Orleans Saints. His son, Garrett, is obviously the quarterback for the LSU Tigers. And I'm not going to make any predictions on the NFL today, but I would assume that Doug is going to be watching Garrett, number one, obviously, because of him being a father supporting his son, but also I wonder if there's going to be any off-the-record scouting involved. I wonder if that is going to be the case. My instincts are telling me that in some respects that is definitely going to be the case as it relates to Doug watching his son Garrett this upcoming Saturday night, I guess tomorrow night, in Death Valley. And so that is going to be another very fun thing to watch as it relates to this game. It's going to be interesting to see the battle that takes place between Garrett Nussmeier and Cade Klubnik. There may be a lot of points involved, but on the other hand, there may not be a lot of points involved because of the talent that these teams also have on the defensive side of the football. So that's going to be fun to watch. Be sure to set the alarms and DVRs for 6:30 p.m. Central Time on ABC, I believe. And so that's a biggie. Another biggie that's coming up in week 1 is Notre Dame. Almost forgot to throw up when I said their name just now. And Miami. And these are also 2 teams that are ranked in the top 10. Notre Dame, of course, entering the preseason ranked number 6. And the Miami Hurricanes, as they enter the post-Cam Ward era, are coming in, rounding out the top 10 at number 10 in the preseason. And as I was alluding to before, as much as I hate Notre Dame in many ways, I have to give credit where credit is due. Coach Marcus Freeman did a outstanding job last year in guiding his team to the college football playoff national championship game. And they've got a lot of questions at the quarterback position to answer as well. Of course, the quarterback that took them there last year, Riley Leonard, is no longer there, as he is now a member of the Indianapolis Colts, I believe, and perhaps the Tennessee Titans will have to deal with good old Riley once or twice a year, depending on how the Indianapolis Colts quarterback situation plays out, because it is a mess up there in Indianapolis, let me just tell you. With the whole Anthony Richardson thing and blah, 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 Danny Dimes as well, blah, 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 blah. Obviously, I'm not going to get too far into the weeds on the Colts, especially in this episode. But point I'm trying to make is this. Riley Leonard, no longer there. In comes C.J. Carr as the starting quarterback at Notre Dame. And for those of you college football sickos out there who are familiar with the name Carr, yes, young C.J. happens to be the grandson of the legendary coach Lloyd Carr from the University of Michigan. And so it's a lot of you may have the obvious question. I was also one of those people that asked the question, why is Lloyd Carr's grandson not going to the University of Michigan? That is a separate discussion for another day. But nevertheless, CJ and Jeremiah Love, one guy that I'm very excited to see if he can build on the success that he had last year. Jeremiah Love, the running back at the University of Notre Dame, made some very incredible plays last year, especially in the opening round game of the college football playoff against Indiana. The big touchdown run that he had, which kind of helped propel Notre Dame to somewhat of a blowout victory against the Hoosiers in that opening round game. Obviously, it's going to be interesting to see what he does this year. He is certainly going to be a name to watch for as we head into the NFL draft cycle in 2026, along with Garrett Nussmeier and Cade Klubnik. It's just going to be interesting to see where they all fall on the board, but luckily for us, we have plenty of time to sort all of that out. So that's pretty much my breakdown of the Fighting Irish. Switching gears to the U, as they call it, the University of Miami. Obviously, as I mentioned before, they are moving into the post-Cam Ward era and are going to be trotting out Carson Beck, the former starting quarterback at the University of Georgia. And it's going to be really interesting to see what Carson Beck can do without the level of playmakers, certainly, that he had on the offensive side of the ball at Georgia. I'm thinking of Brock Bowers in particular as probably the key playmaker that Carson Beck had for the 1 year, because I believe he was a 2-year starter at Georgia, and of course only had Brock for the first of those 2 years. And of course we saw the drop off from Carson Beck in season 2 as the starting quarterback for the Bulldogs. And so this year, obviously Carson Beck has a lot of questions that he has to answer as well, such as, can he truly be the leader of a program, or is he one of those guys that kind of gets lost in the sauce as it relates to being a figurehead, or not necessarily a program even having a figurehead, much like the Georgia Bulldogs did. That's nothing against the Georgia Bulldogs. It's actually a compliment to the Georgia Bulldogs, because boy, what a complete team they have been. Really, ever since Kirby Smart has been at the helm at Georgia. But as far as my thoughts on Carson Beck are leading into this game, the question of, can he be the guy? My answer on that is, I'm maybe a little bit skeptical, if I'm being honest, but the time is going to have to tell the story on that. And so that is going to be a biggie as well. The question of, and of course me being biased as a Titans fan, the question of, is Carson Beck a little bit of a downgrade from Cam Ward? Obviously, my Titans fandom says absolutely it is, but of course we are going to have to see how, as you can hear me knocking on wood there, the time is going to have to tell the story on that. But as I sit here today, my thoughts on Carson Beck are, I'm a little bit skeptical of him coming in and sort of shouldering a program. But we will just have to wait and see. Okie doke, so that's pretty much my take on the second biggest game of the next couple of days, anyway, as it relates to college football. Number one, the top game that will be on my mind heading into tomorrow's week 1 games. And I'm a little bit mad in some ways that I have to flip back and forth between this game and the Tennessee-Syracuse game, is Texas at Ohio State. The defending national champion Ohio State Buckeyes taking on the team that not only is preseason number 1, but also is a lot of people's pick, I should say, to win it all this year. The Texas Longhorns. And of course, I mentioned the fact that there's going to be a lot of NFL scouts potentially at the LSU Clemson game, there are almost definitely going to be a lot of NFL scouts at this one to see guys like, I don't know, Arch Manning, if he even decides to come out in the draft next year. That because he may or may not. Who knows? Who knows? But guys like Arch Manning, guys like Jeremiah Smith, certainly from Ohio State. I could go on and on and on about the level of NFL talent that is going to be displayed in Columbus, Ohio this weekend. But I'm very much looking forward to seeing that. The one thing that I'm not looking forward to, I have to say, and this is nothing against Gus Johnson as a broadcaster. I have nothing but the utmost respect for Gus Johnson as a broadcaster, but just to listen to the bias he shows when calling Ohio State games, and for those of you who are with me on this in the comments, please feel free to weigh in, but I cannot stand listening to Gus Johnson call Ohio State games because the bias, it's almost like listening to Gary Danielson call Alabama games back in the day. It was just insufferable for me to listen to. And going back a few years ago to when MHJ, Marvin Harrison Jr., was playing at Ohio State, every time the man would enter the game, and this did not actually happen, but if you listen to Gus, let's just say Marvin Harrison Jr. was entering the game, the offense was coming onto the field, and of course the camera went straight to Marvin Harrison Jr. Just listening to Gus Johnson say that something like, hypothetically, of course, because this didn't actually happen. It just goes into the bias that Gus Johnson has for Ohio State. Gus Johnson would go out of his way almost to point out that there goes Maserati Marv and the Ohio State Buckeyes. Maserati Marv. It's funny because I've literally the only person I've heard refer to Marvin Harrison Jr. as Maserati Marv. Literally, the only person is Gus Johnson. None of the NFL broadcasters, nobody at Ohio State, not Ryan Day, not Kyle McCord, his quarterback, who he goes back all the way in high school with. Former high school teammates and college teammates were Kyle McCord and Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, Will Howard, nobody has referred to Marvin Harrison Jr. as Maserati. I mean, really, Gus? Really? That's just so absurd to me. But, whatever floats your boat, Gus. Whatever floats your boat, I guess. But the one thing I will say before I move on to breaking down Ohio State's chances in this game are, Gus, I'm looking forward to watching the game but I'm gonna be paying attention to the way you talk about the Ohio State Buckeyes throughout the broadcast. And maybe I'll miss some of it because, again, I will be flipping back and forth between this one and Tennessee Syracuse. But maybe I'll miss some of those biases start to come out. But again, nothing but love for Gus Johnson as a broadcaster. But when he calls Ohio State games, I sort of cringe a little because the bias that comes out. We know who you're rooting for behind the scenes, Gus. We understand, Gus. We do. But much love to Gus Johnson, I suppose. But as it relates to the Ohio State Buckeyes, not only have they lost Maserati Marv, of course they lost him a couple of years ago. He was actually not a member of last year's national championship team. But having said that, Ohio State did lose a lot of people from that national championship team that they had last year. Obviously, I mentioned Will Howard, the quarterback, the former Kansas State transfer. He is, of course, a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers now. But as it relates to Ohio State, he is going to be replaced by Julian Sayin, the former Alabama transfer. A lot of transfers nowadays in the world of college football. But not only is Ohio State losing Will Howard, and they're going to have to replace him with a new quarterback in Julian Sayin, they're also losing, let's see, from the offensive side. Oh gosh, the offensive side of the ball. They're losing the two-headed monster that they had last year in Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson. They are losing Emeka Egbuka, the big-time wide receiver. First-round draft pick of the Buccaneers was Emeka Egbuka. I'm really surprised he didn't come out in the draft last year in 2024 because I think he was eligible. But obviously, when you do bet on yourself, sometimes it pays off in a lot of ways. And obviously, the fact that Emeka chose to come back did not hurt his draft stock whatsoever. And he even got a national championship out of it. So, kudos to Emeka Egbuka. But Ohio State is not going to have him. They are, of course, going to still have Jeremiah Smith, who I guess is going to be Gus Johnson's new darling in the post-Maserati Marv era. And again, this is not a slight to Gus Johnson because Jeremiah Smith is a darling in a lot of people's eyes. I mean, this is a man that is being put at the top of Heisman Trophy contenders lists, and with good reason. But it's going to be interesting to see how he performs with a new quarterback against Colin Simmons. Obviously, he's not going to be going one-on-one against Colin Simmons, the edge rusher at Texas. But having said that, Texas does boast a pretty incredible defense, aside from the fact that they are losing some of the good talent that they had on the defensive side of the ball last year. Jahdae Barron in particular. Speaking of talent that these teams have on the defensive side of the ball, Ohio State's going to be losing a lot of it as well. They're going to be trying to replace Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau. I am pronouncing that name correctly. Obviously, it's a very hard name to pronounce, as a lot of these Polynesian sounding names are nowadays. I believe JT is of the Polynesian persuasion. But anyway, Ohio State, coming back to my main point here, Ohio State is obviously going to try to replace some guys on the defensive side of the ball as well. Obviously, Caleb Downs is still there on the back end, but who else is going to step up? I don't know, but I'm very much looking forward to finding out. And with all of that being said, that is pretty much going to wrap it up for me today, guys. There's going to be plenty of other big-time games, aside from these three, I should say, on the slate, including games that are going to be played on, I believe it's Monday night in particular, and part of me cannot believe I'm about to say this, but I am about to say this. Bill Belichick making his college head coaching debut at the University of North Carolina as they take on TCU. Obviously, that's neither one of those teams are ranked, but maybe that will maybe that will change. Maybe that will not change. I don't know. But the fact that Bill Belichick and, to a lesser extent, Jordan Hudson are involved is kind of a big deal. And I'm very much looking forward to that, looking forward to seeing Coach, and looking forward to seeing how many times Jordan Hudson manages to make her way in front of a camera, because, as we all know, she's become very good at doing that over the course of the last year or so. But I digress. And with all of that being said, I guess I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up for today. I said that I was going to keep this episode a little shorter than last time, and I just barely did that, I think, but I appreciate you all bearing with me. Like I said at the top of the show, there's going to be a lot more NFL news to follow in future episodes of this show, so get your popcorn ready, ladies and gentlemen, because I'm very much looking forward to bringing it to you, as I hope you are very much looking forward to listening to it. And so, with all of that being said, that's going to wrap it up for me today. Thank you all so much for watching this edition of the Jim Bratton Podcast. I appreciate it, and I will see you guys next time.